A citizen should render to the state all the services he can as soon as the sovereign demands them. Take from the philosopher the pleasure of being heard, and his desire for knowledge ceases. The desire to be better understood has been extinguished from my heart. I may be asked whether I am a prince or a legislator that I should be writing about politics. I answer no, and indeed that is my reason for doing so. If I were a prince or a legislator, I should not waste my time saying what ought to be done. I should do it or keep silent. Money is the seed of money, and the first guinea is sometimes more difficult to acquire than the second million. How have 100 men who wish for a master the right to vote on behalf of 10 who do not? The law of majority voting is itself something established by convention, and presupposes unanimity, on one occasion at least. 6. To renounce liberty is to renounce being a man, to surrender the rights of humanity and even its duties. Every artist wants to be applauded. Civilization is a hopeless race to discover remedies for the evils it produces. A person who has lived the most is not the one with the most years, but the one with the richest experiences. There is no folly of which a man who is not a fool cannot get rid except vanity. Of this nothing cures a man except experience of its bad consequences, if indeed anything can cure it. Virtue is a state of war, and to live in it we have always to combat with ourselves. He who blushes is already guilty. To live is not merely to breathe, it is to act. It is to make use of our organs, senses, faculties, of all those parts of ourselves which give us the feeling of existence. I only see clearly what I remember. Man's first language, the most universal, the most energetic, and the only language he needed before it was necessary to persuade men assembled together, is the cry of nature. Sometimes my reveries end in meditation, but more often my meditations end in reverie, and during these wanderings my soul roams and takes flight through the universe on the wings of the imagination and ecstasies that exceed all other pleasures. I hate books, they only teach us to talk about things we know nothing about. Narder manifiesto tanto las verdaderas inclinaciones der un hombre como las clases de relations que contrarie. Temperance and labor are the two best physicians of man. Labor sharpens the appetite, and temperance prevents from indulging to excess. Days of absence, sad and dreary, clothed in sorrow's dark array. Days of absence, I am weary, she I love is far away. Poetic verse by. I prefer liberty with danger to peace with slavery. Consolation indiscreetly pressed upon us when we are suffering undue affliction only serves to increase our pain and to render our grief more poignant. The man who gets the most out of life is not the one who has lived it longest, but the one who has felt life most deeply. He who pretends to look on death without fear lies. All men are afraid of dying. This is the great law of sentient beings, without which the entire human species would soon be destroyed. In truth, laws are always useful to those with possessions and harmful to those who have nothing, from which it follows that the social state is advantageous to men only when all possess something and none has too much. born as I was the citizen of a free state and a member of its sovereign body. The very right to vote imposes on me the duty to instruct myself in public affairs, however little influence my voice may have in them. What wisdom can you find that is greater than kindness? A feeble body weakens the mind. Never in a monarchy can the opulence of an individual put him above the prince, but in a republic, it can easily put him above the laws. Then the government no longer has force, and the rich are always the true sovereign. Respect childhood and leave nature to act for a long time before you get involved with acting in its place. One loses all the time which he might employ to better purpose. Childhood has its own way of seeing, thinking, and feeling, and nothing is more foolish than to try to substitute ours for theirs. Each of us puts his person and all his power in common under the supreme direction of the general will, and, in our corporate capacity, we receive each member as an indivisible part of the whole. Man was born free, and he is everywhere in chains. Those who think themselves the masters of others are indeed greater slaves than they. Absolute silence leads to sadness. It is the image of death. Our will is always for our own good, but we do not always see what that is. The people is never corrupted, but it is often deceived, and on such occasions only does it seem to will what is bad. It is by the activity of our passions that our reason improves. We covet knowledge merely because we covet enjoyment, and it is impossible to conceive why a man exempt from fears and desires should take the trouble to reason. The wisest writers devote themselves to what a man ought to know, without asking what a child is capable of learning. The first step towards vice is to shroud innocent actions in mystery, and whoever likes to conceal something sooner or later has reason to conceal it. We seek knowledge only because we desire enjoyment, and it is impossible to conceive why a person who has neither desires nor fears would take the trouble to reason. Love, known to the person by whom it is inspired, becomes more bearable. Whoever refuses to obey the general will be forced to do so by the entire body. This means merely that he will be forced to be free. So now I am alone in the world, with no brother, neighbor, or friend, nor any company left me but my own. To write a good love letter, you ought to begin without knowing what you mean to say, and to finish without knowing what you have written. War, then, is a relation not between man and man, but between state, and individuals are enemies only accidentally, not as men, nor even as citizens, but as soldiers, not as members of their country, but as its defenders. We pity in others only those evils which we ourselves have experienced. People who know little are usually great talkers, while men who know much say little. How many famous and high-spirited heroes have lived a day too long? Although modesty is natural to man, it is not natural to children. Modesty only begins with a knowledge of evil. To abstain that we may enjoy is the Epicureanism of reason. Gambling is only the resource of those who do not know what to do with themselves. We must powder our wigs, that is why so many poor people have no bread.